Julio, Julio, oh, I, oh,
Hi, and welcome to Terry Talks Movies, and this time around on Science Fiction Saturday, I've got a couple of obscurities for you. One from 1969, one from 1979, and both of them are weird each in their own way. I think one's more successful than the other, but we're going to talk about the one that's least successful first. From 1969, an adaptation of a novel by Keith Laumer called The Monitors. This movie is weird in a kind of way that should have made it weirder. It was produced by the Second City Comedy Troupe and financed and co-produced by Bell and Howell, the film company, the people who made movie projectors and cameras and things like that. They really wanted to make Chicago a film production center like Hollywood. It didn't happen. This movie wasn't the way to do it. It's kind of interesting. It was directed by a guy called Jack Shea, who ended up being the president of the Directors Guild of America in around the turn of this century. But he was mostly known for doing TV shows. He did Jerry Lewis TV shows in the 60s and the Bob Hope TV specials. So he was very much a kind of company man, not the kind of director who in 1969 you needed to make a wild satire about the state of the world. And that's the intention of this film, to be a wild satire about the state of the world. But it doesn't punch hard. It gets a lot of actors who are mostly known for TV work, and they're not necessarily the ones you would think of when you're thinking 1969 movie satire. The story's pretty simple. Earth's been taken over by a benign group of aliens known as the Monitors. This is from Wikipedia. Gentlemanly figures clad in black overcoats and bowler hats, and they're all guys for some reason. They are dedicated to suppressing humanity's propensity for violence, sex, war, and trouble, at least two of which I like, enforcing their ethos with spray cans of a pacifying gas, and with television ads praising the Monitors' rule. And those television ads feature various comedic actors and celebrities. Xavier Cugat's in them, Stubby Kaye, who was in Guys and Dolls, and a Republican Illinois senator at the time, Everett Dirksen, who died before the movie came out. He was a chain smoker and they'd caught up with him. The movie stars Guy Stockwell, brother of Dean Stockwell, as a pilot called Harry, who's kind of a freelance guy. It's never quite clear what he does and why. He meets a movie actress called Barbara, played by Susan Oliver, who's a collaborator with the Monitors. Harry's brother Max, played by a comedian called Avery Schreiber, who's about as funny as a house brick. He and Harry get involved with an organisation called SCRAG, Secret Counter-Retaliatory Group, which is a monitor resistance group who want to take the Earth back from the Monitors. Because the Monitors are running things and everybody kind of likes them. You know, kids aren't eating too much candy and their teeth aren't rotting. The world's running smoothly, at least on the surface. It's just that the government's been taken over by these aliens who monitor and police human behavior. The leader of the aliens, and there's always got to be a leader of these aliens, there's a guy called Tersh Jederax, played by Shepard Strudwick, who basically wants the world to be nice and peaceful. His job on the intergalactic Kumbaya group is to keep Earth calm and keep Earth functioning. And one of the things he says is that nobody's going to force the Monitors to leave the Earth. It's not something that humanity can or will do. It's not in their nature to give in to threats of violence, for instance. So you get this weird alternate world where they're doing mockumentary TV ads for these aliens, some of which are funnier than others, some of which work better than others. And you've got this SCRAG group led by Keenan Wynn, who are there to destroy the aliens and come up with an implosion bomb that they want Harry to deliver to the aliens and to therefore stop them from keeping their sovereignty over the Earth. Most of the movie shot on the streets of Chicago, and it's done kind of guerrilla style. So there's all of these guys in long black coats and bowler hats doing weird things on the streets of Chicago while actors run around. It's just an odd movie from that point of view, where you've got a successful alien invasion, which isn't as bad as being invaded by the Americans, for instance, but it's still something that people are railing against. We get some other cameos in the movie as well. Alan Arkin does a cameo in one of the ads, as indeed does his son Adam as a child. And the whole movie's got this feel that it wants to be edgier than it is, but it's financed by a corporation who makes cameras. And the director is a guy who's mostly known for doing very middle-of-the-road comedic television shows. And it just doesn't land for that reason. They needed somebody who smoked grass and occasionally dropped acid and really had a vision as a director to direct this one. It needed to be madder. It needed to have a little touch of, say, Bob Rafelson's Head, the Monkeys movie. It needed that kind of randomness and that kind of craziness. And unfortunately, it doesn't have it. It's got actors in their 30s as protagonists, whereas what they needed to have was young people in their 20s going up against this repressive but benign government of aliens. If they had have got the monkeys to play the leads in this and got them to be in the film, it would have landed really well. If they had got Bob Rafelson to direct it and Bob Rafelson and Jack Nicholson to write the script as they did in Head, this movie would have landed really well. It would have been crazier. And this is 1969. This is the peak moment in 20th century American history when if you were going to make a crazy, goofy, comedic movie, you needed to grow your hair down and smoke a joint now and then. You needed that idealistic madness of youth for this movie to work. And it doesn't. And it's such a shame because I think the basic concept, the bones and the skeleton are there to make a really good counterculture movie of the 1960s. But they were cautious. And with this kind of movie, the last thing you need to be is cautious. You need to be wild. You need to be random. And you need to punch harder if you're doing a satirical movie. All the best satires punch upwards and they punch hard. And The Monitors doesn't because it is too careful. And Second City, even though it is definitely known to have nurtured any number of fantastic comedic talents, never really nurtured the outliers, the crazy people on the edges of comedy who made comedy better than it was, who punched upwards, who punched hard. And this is a shame because I came into this movie with great expectations and great optimism that it would hit hard. 1960s satire about capitalism and about government and about all of the things that in 1969 needed to have their asses kicked. None of it's in this movie. And that's a hell of a shame. The actors are giving it a good go. Guy Stockwell I like as an actor. He's not quite the goofy, edgy guy that his brother Dean is, but he's serviceable. Susan Oliver's an actress whose career should have gone further than it did. Ed Begley playing Ed Begley Sr., not Ed Begley Jr., playing the president. And when they find the president in the Oval Office, he and his office are covered in cobwebs because they've got nothing to do. And he's sitting at the Resolute desk doing crossword puzzles, which I thought was funny. That was a great moment. But it just doesn't land hard enough, and it's just such a pity. Harry, the character played by Guy Stockwell, has a brother played by Avery Schreiber. And Avery Schreiber is one of those comedians of the 1960s and 70s who never hit for me. It's just like, you know, it's as funny as a kid on crutches, a weird choice. And I'm sure there were any number of people working in Second City in the 1960s who could have hit this one out of the ballpark, but they just simply didn't. I like the movie's concept. I really do. I think it's a great concept for a movie. And Keith Laumer's novel, which was satirical, needed better handling than this one. But if you're one of those people like me that wants to see every science fiction movie, you're going to check this one out. It's got a certain style to it, but I think even at the time it was made, it was pretty obvious to see what the flaws were. And the flaws were a lack of courage. And there are any number of movies like this where you can see where they should have gone. You could see what they should have done. You could shine a light in the right direction for them. And even though we have the comfort of hindsight, even at the time, it was pretty obvious what this movie needed to do, but it didn't. For me, that's sad. nobody really was doing many adaptations of science fiction novels at the time. Yes, there was Elliot Petrie's The 10th Victim, and later on there were things like The Final Program, adapted from Michael Moorcock's novel. But there was just such a richness of potential material for movies in the 1960s based on science fiction novels. And you got to remember, this is the age of the new wave of science fiction, where the Young Turks were coming out and doing weird and wonderful things. Any number of them would have sold the rights to their stories and books if somebody would just make the movie of it. So this one's a failure, but it's a failure that I still kind of like, because it decided to try something even if it didn't try very hard.
We are here to serve humanity, here to reaffirm gentility.
So that's the first one I got for you. The second one is from 1979, and it hits a lot harder, and it's weirder, and it comes from West Germany, as it was at the time, because Germany was still split down the middle because Cold War. This one was directed by a wild director called Peter Fleischmann, and it was a German-French co-production called The Hamburg Disease, or Die Hamburger Krankheit, which I'm going to mispronounce. And it's about a pandemic. Yeah, it's a 1979 pandemic movie, which was re-released in 2020 because everybody really needed to have more stuff about pandemics in 2020. And it's a movie that's sat with me since I've watched it. It stars Helmut Green, who was the boyfriend of both the Michael York and the Liza Minnelli characters in Cabaret. And he plays a health official, gerontologist, who is right at the start of this pandemic. He's there when a bunch of unexplained deaths happen in Hamburg, and there's this weird disease where people just basically fall over, curl up in a fetal position and die. That's the symptoms. There's not much else to go with, apart from the fact that if you're infected at some stage, you'll fall down on the ground, you'll curl up into a fetal position and die, which is kind of freaky because it's not like this is a coughing and spluttering and bleeding disease. This is just curl up and die. Like the, which is, come to think of it, is the name of Carrie Fisher's hairdressing studio in the Blues Brothers. So this doctor called Sebastian, played by Helmut Green, is right there at the start and starts getting involved with it. And as the pandemic starts spreading, he is placed in a quarantine building with bunk beds and things like that, along with a group of other people. There's a sausage seller. There's a guy of short stature in a wheelchair. There's a young sex worker called Ulrika, and a bunch of other people are placed in this quarantine. And the authorities are getting very, very strict on this. They're not considering the human side of it. They're working on cures for the disease and things like that. And then there's a breakout from this quarantine facility. And the Dr. Sebastian, Heribert, the sausage seller, Ulrika, and Ottokar, the guy in the wheelchair, all escape and start fleeing south towards the German Alps, for reasons they know themselves. The movie ends up being a kind of picaresque traveling study of what's happening during this pandemic, which is spreading beyond Germany by the time the movie ends. And there's a kind of uncertain ending to it as well. So the death toll starts rising a lot, and the authorities are clamping down. They're not handling it well. The four characters manage to break out and leave Hamburg and head south. They split up at various times. They search. They end up in a village and find another guy called Fritz, who has been terrified. And they find him sitting on the roof of a house naked because some guy had coughed on him and splattered him with various bodily fluids. So he stripped off all his clothes and isolated himself on the roof of a building. They meet another guy called Alexander, who is just trying to get a caravan that his company has sold to somebody, to the people he sold it to. So he's got a four-wheel drive towing this caravan around. And that ends up being their mobile home while they're traveling south. And things get more and more anarchic and chaotic as they travel. Various characters catch the disease and just roll over and die. Meanwhile, every time they encounter the authorities are getting more and more draconian. They're in a traffic jam, and suddenly somebody who has stolen an army tank drives the tank across this row of cars and ends up being chased by an army helicopter. Things get increasingly crazy. They meet up with a couple of Italian women with a baby, and they travel with them for a while. And they end up going into a town and finding a secret party of people, which gets wilder and wilder and ends up paralleling The Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe. And so it gets more and more anarchic, more and more crazy. There's quite a tragic encounter with a trans woman. There's local people as they travel south who form a militia and shoot people on sight. The movie just gets wilder and wilder and sadder, and characters you don't expect to die. Other characters find a way to prevail during this. Heribert, the guy who sells sausages out of a food truck, ends up starting a new business selling PPE equipment with Otakar, the guy in the wheelchair. And they keep popping in and out of the narrative, which is basically following Ulrika and the other characters as they travel. And we don't know any more than the characters do, really, because we're seeing it from their point of view. So the government says is doing a vaccine, but the vaccine has side effects on certain people and makes them wildly violent. And the government and the authorities become very unreliable and very dangerous to be around for anybody. And that too rolls into this. And the movie becomes more and more absurdist and more silly. There are comedic parts in this film. While you're enjoying the comedy of it, you're aware of the fact that the circumstances for everybody are pretty dire and horrible, and unexpectedly, incredibly tragic things happen. And I'm not doing spoilers to ruin this movie for you. It kind of has a combination of dystopian science fiction as society crumbles. It has absurdist comedy aspects. It has art house aspects. It has references to other works like The Mask of the Red Death, when they go to this wild party where everybody's crammed together and you think, last thing you want to do with the pandemic is get a ton of people together. What are you, Boris Johnson? You get that kind of feel about it because we've got such a recent and well-researched knowledge of what to do and what not to do in pandemics. And watching this movie, you cringe every time somebody breaks a quarantine or doesn't wear a mask when they should, or breathes in somebody else's face. We've got all of these memories that make this movie hit harder than it would have for a 1979 audience. It's just an incredibly weird and prophetic in some ways movie. It ends on a weird note too. And one of the weird things about it is Ulrika eventually reaches the southern German Alps and ends up in a country house with her grandfather. And the last thing we see is a grandfather yodeling out of a window. It's just, this movie is living rent-free in my head. It is just something totally different. I'd heard about it years ago. I heard about it during the pandemic, but I never found a copy of it. It is currently on YouTube as well. But this movie is something unusual, particularly for 1979. And it talks to a whole bunch of things like how fragile I think society is when people are threatened by something. We got a lot of evidence of that during the pandemic, and we're still living with the repercussions of that. The ability to create false narratives around vaccines and the ability to assume that the government is doing hostile things when all it's doing is trying to stop people from dying. All of that kind of stuff rolls into this movie. And yes, it is a lot more cynical about government than I am, but I respect the point of view the movie takes. You got to check this one out. It is just something wild. And unlike the monitors, it doesn't pull punches. It goes full tilt boogie when it needs to. And it talks to things regarding quarantine and health regulations and things like that, that really other movies just don't do. There is another movie called Contagion that hits the idea of a pandemic quite as hard as the Hamburg syndrome. And you should really check it out. It may still be a little bit raw for you because of what we've lived through in the last 5 years. It's an honest piece of work. It does what it does incredibly well. It's not predictable in any way. There's no foreshadowing of strange and tragic and crazy events that occur. We find out about them as the characters find out about them, and suddenly they're dodging a tank that's just ramming through people, and suddenly they're in a little town where things are going weird. Suddenly you walking through a village and there's a naked man on a roof who you want to help because he's obviously in great distress. All this kind of stuff happens. It's an underrated movie. It's definitely 100% science fiction. It's just solidly a science fiction movie, but very different, very original, and it sticks to its guns when it comes to the ideas it's trying to put across. So that's what I got for you this time around. 2 movies, very different, separated by 10 years and an ocean. One of them punches hard, one of them doesn't punch hard. One of them's hitting you with pillows. What it should hit you with is a sock full of billiard balls. But that's the nature of cinema. Sometimes movies hit hard. Sometimes movies lack the courage of their conviction. And I think that's a lesson for us all. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. You can also support the channel by becoming a channel member or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/terrytalksmovies. Next up, I've got a nice haul of new things from Imprint, including the Powell and Pressburger collection, which is incredible. So until I release that one, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies, watch some gutsy movies, because even when they make you feel sick to your stomach and horrible, they're getting an honest reaction from you. And I'll catch you next time.
The city hums low, its secrets keep. A neon flicker, a jazzy glow, where the cool cats linger, where whiskers flow. Bongo beats, they tick and tock, time slips by like a jazz.